Evening and welcome to tonight's session this is the fourth in our series of Winterage webinars this week. This Q&A gives you an opportunity to hear from different people on the subject matter, but it also gives you the opportunity to ask your pressing questions about it. So tonight's session will kickstart with a short overview, a presentation, and then my co-host and co-founder of Farming for Nature, Brendan Dunford, will facilitate any questions to the speakers. If you have any questions, please put them in your chat box, which should be on your banner along the bottom of your screen. Just type in your questions and we'll answer them. We'll hopefully either get to them or we'll type back the answers into the chat box. Also, if you know any answers to the questions, feel free to engage and join the chat box as well. If you missed any of these sessions from earlier in the week or previous Q&As, they'll be on our YouTube channel. And if you have to leave early or you know anyone that would be really interested in this session, like I say, it will be on our YouTube channel over the next few hours. So brilliant. On to tonight's session. I'll let Brendan introduce the speakers and take it from there. Enjoy.
Thanks very much, Bridget, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. So tonight we're going to talk about something very important. It's financing farming for nature. I know over the years, it's been a privilege to work with farmers who really want to do more for nature, and I meet them all the time. But of course, farming is a business and nature needs to make business sense as an investment for farmers. Now, it's not all about the money. It's also about other things, but I think the financial piece around farming for nature is really, really important. So tonight we've got a wonderful mix of speakers. I've got four amazing people joining me tonight. And so we'll have between us about 30 minutes of input, and then we're going to turn over to you guys for questions. So the first speaker tonight is Dr. Catherine Farrell, and Catherine is a researcher in Trinity College Dublin with a long history working with nature. She's an ecologist, but also as a researcher in Trinity College Dublin. So Catherine, I might hand over to you to get the ball rolling on financing farming for nature.
Great, thanks a million, Brendan. And I am sharing my screen and I'm just hoping that everyone can see it.
Yep, looks good.
Are we good? Great. So thanks so much for the invitation to speak this evening, and I'm delighted to be with such an esteemed panel. I am going to talk about this really critical topic, financing farming for nature. I'm going to set up the scene for the rest of our panelists to respond. And I think we should generate some lively questions looking at the people on the panel. So I just wanted to provide a bit of context as to why we're talking about financing farming and nature and where they sit together. And, you know, I'm an ecologist. I've been working as an ecologist for 30 years. I've been based in Ireland for all that time. And, you know, for all that time, I've been aware that there's a loss of biodiversity in our landscape. It's a global issue. But it's also felt keenly in Ireland. And what does that mean globally? We have biodiversity loss driven by changing land use, we have climate change, and lots of other pressures, including invasive alien species. We know that about 80% of nature conservation funding comes from the public sector, but we also know that there's a massive gap in terms of achieving and reversing some of those trends in nature that we have to do in order to address climate change and to secure our livelihoods. And we know in Ireland that 85% of our habitats are in unfavorable status, and so many of our native plants and species are in decline. And, you know, so this is setting up what's our motivation and understanding why we're here talking about this evening. In an Irish context, and it's quite unique and different in Ireland, that 70% of our land is farmed. And farmers, therefore, you know, many of those could be considered economically vulnerable. So where's the future? Where's the finance here for farming our land and for enabling farmers, like many of the people in the Farming for Nature network who want to do more for nature? So farmers play a crucial role and an opportunity. So I am not going to talk about doom and gloom. I'm going to talk about opportunities, because we're driven to find solutions, and we're driven to act rather than just moan about this situation. And so financing farming for nature, from my perspective, it's action oriented, to find solutions and to drive impact. And so over the last couple of years for Brendan and Anke, they have been working, diligently in their own brains, and then a number of us joined the challenge over the past year, and we're delighted to announce that a Project Refarm was launched last night in Trinity by Minister Pippa Hackett. And this wonderful picture here shows the team, which I can go into a bit more detail. It shows the team along with some of our impact investors who are going to be supporting the work. So over the last couple of months, we've been really fine-tuning what we're about. And just to be clear, our vision is to make farming for nature a sustainable and, importantly, a scalable solution to address the twin crisis of biodiversity and climate. And why is that important? So we talk a lot about climate crisis, and people don't often join the dots, as it were, and realize that in order to address climate change, we have to have operate in terms of restoring nature. And how do we bring that to life? So this is where wonderful people like Anke, who has a background in developing financial structures, having Brendan here and Michael in terms of how do we drive nature positive actions on the farm. And then this is really important. This is a collaboration. We can't do things in isolation anymore. We can't have siloed thinking, and we have to work together. So we have farmers, businesses, investors, and researchers. And it's not intended to be a long-winded research project. It's intended to be high-impact research. So the objectives and aims, and we agonized over these for some time, but really we've distilled them to create a funding structure that would enable corporates and businesses to invest in high-impact nature-positive actions on farms. And that in turn would enable farmers to take nature-positive actions, and they would earn a financial return. So not just an initial capital investment, we want to see an ongoing payment and a financial dividend for the nature dividend that the farmers will be delivering. And we know that there are schemes, we know there are agri-environmental programs, but we feel that these need to be complemented and enhanced, because at this point in time, there isn't the incentive to go that bit further. Most farmers will have maxed out on their agri-environmental payments. And there's so much more that we have to do. So it's about being efficient, finding a funding stream that matches the farmers' needs, and importantly, that corporates can invest. And it has to be the most ecologically advantageous. So upscaling from the successful Burren program and, getting out to that 70% of our land that is farmed and that is, in the hands of people who would be more than willing to act for nature. So in a nutshell, we've structured our program to have an initial phase, and we hope that after the initial phase that the research element will be sort of pushed to the shadow, and that we'll have our wonderful funding structure. So we have corporates committing funds. So this is not just that they've rocked up and decided, oh, well, here's some money. So there's been a lot of engagement over the last year in terms of finding the right partners, people who want to invest in this, who see it as good business sense. And that will be a fund to support actions. So actions that are already being carried out through the Hare's Corner, for example. And those investors are part funding the research. And I'll explain that in the third pillar. And we'll work alongside the corporates to find out what matters for them. So we're now in a situation where businesses have to report their non-financial disclosures. What does that mean? It means, what are their impacts on nature? What are their dependencies and their risks and opportunities in a world where nature is under pressure? And how can they report their impacts? But importantly, how can they report and act to reduce their impacts and also possibly compensate for some of the actions that they can't reduce on their side? So we have wonderful support from RWE Ireland, that's a renewables company, CIE Tours, and Ken is with us here tonight, John Paul Construction, and philanthropic foundation, Community Foundation Ireland. In terms of the actions on farms, well, Brendan is the best man to talk about this, but it's all about building on this hassle-free approach. So we wanted actions to happen immediately, so that this isn't just a talking shop. This is about socializing the ideas. It's having immediate impact that we can then communicate and encourage and reassure people that, yes, we know how to do this, and the money from these corporates is going straight to action. And then, of course, providing the assurance that we're doing the right thing, or, you know, when we need advice, taking actions on farms. The research is about that engagement with the stakeholders, with the businesses, and importantly, with the farmers. What works? So in order for the businesses to report, they need to have a very robust monitoring, reporting, and verification. Now, you might hear that in a phrase MRV, and so get used to that language, but it's really about how do we actually report back. So we'll be working on that, but you know, importantly, there's an ecological dividend, but there's also a social dividend in terms of sustaining and supporting farming as a tradition, as a livelihood in the countryside. So that's the work through Trinity College Dublin and supported by Science Foundation Ireland by Orbic Research Centre. And that brings me to this wonderful team. So this very much collaboration with Brendan from the Burren Programme and Farming for Nature, co-founder with Anke Heydenreich, who's with us. And Anke has great expertise in financial investment, and her colleague Susanna, who's been absolutely, you know, really, you know, driving the engagement with the investors. And then, of course, we have Jane Stout, very well known for driving the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, and, you know, very much action driven. Martha O'Hagan is a wonderful person in the business school in Trinity, so she's that link with the businesses. And indeed, the Trinity Business School have actually supported a number of some funds for the work as well. And then there's myself, a good Westmeath woman living in Mayo, but somehow doing this research in Trinity, which is fantastic. And our colleague Orla, who's formerly of KPMG, and she really understands this landscape of reporting. So that's setting it up for the chat. And I'm going to hand back over to you, Brendan. Stop sharing.
That's great, Catherine. Thank you very much. I think that sets the scene nicely. And if I might summarize what you've presented there, it's that, as we know, there's a declared biodiversity emergency in Ireland. To address that, farmers are critical because they're the main landowners. To get farmers to act for nature, funding is a requirement. Public funding is significant, very important, but is limited. So we need new models. So what you're describing in this Project Refarm is a sort of an attempt, at least, of bringing new finance and hopefully new energy into the sector. And I suppose really to summarize what that project is about, it's about trying to say that, look, investing in nature makes sense for business, but investing in nature can also make sense for farmers. So I think it's bringing things to that point. Now, Catherine also described that there's 3 elements to this project, and And I think we're going to focus on this project for the next few minutes, if that's okay, and we can broaden it out again to questions. But there's the funding piece, there's the research piece, and critically, then there's the action piece. So our next speaker is quite an amazing woman who I've been very fortunate to collaborate with over the last couple of years. And it's great when two worlds collide: the financial world, which I know nothing about, and the natural world, which Anke actually does know quite a bit about. So I'm going to hand across to Anke Heydenreich, who's a woman who wears many hats. She's based in Wicklow, and she's very involved in the financial world, but also very involved in Trinity College Dublin. So Anke, I'm going to hand across to you to say a few words maybe about, I think it'd be really nice to hear your backstory and your engagement with this piece around financing farming for nature as well. Okay. Now you're muted, Anke.
Okay, yeah, so there's something else I know nothing about, which is technology. Sorry about that. Yes, good evening, everybody, and thank you for taking the time tonight to listen to this. Yeah, my name is Anke Heydenreich. As you can hear from my accent, I'm German, but I have actually lived in Ireland for almost 30 years, but like between Ireland and London for almost over 30 years. And I studied economics in Trinity College and then went to work in finance for almost 25 years, mainly in London, but on a global level. A few years ago, there's two things happened a few years ago, probably three things, but one thing happened just before COVID is that my husband and myself, we bought a piece of land in Wicklow, and it was his idea. He's Irish, and he really loves nature, and so do I, but he really, really loves nature. So he bought a piece of land, which was, kind of degraded. It just nobody wanted it, and it was very close to where we lived, and we started planting some native trees. And then the second thing which happened was COVID, and I was forced to spend a lot of time on that land helping to plant the trees, because they just arrived just before the lockdown. And for the first bit, there was actually, the planters weren't allowed to come in. So we had the whole family out planting trees, and that was great fun for like a few days. And then the kids kind of didn't like it anymore, but I actually I liked it a lot more than I thought. So we spent a lot of time in COVID there. And then the third thing which happened is that my day-to-day job, which was in London, and I commuted a lot, I gave that up on a daily basis. So I kind of exited the partnership because it was a lot of traveling, but also I really enjoyed looking into other things. And I also, kind of got to learn a lot more about the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis. And that's probably quite late, but it was 3 years ago, and I kind of haven't done anything else but work on various climate projects since. And one of the areas I became much more involved in is on biodiversity. And originally I thought, well, maybe this planting trees is, something you can do all over Ireland. And I spent a lot of time researching it, and I saw a lot of the problems with it, especially that people have to buy the land. And I was completely, why does anybody have to buy the land? There are actually 70% of the land is owned by farmers who know the land and know the environment, and they're so much better to do that. So that's when I worked with people in Trinity, but also some ecologist friends of mine. And whenever we talked about what could have the biggest impact, because when I did investments before, it was always like, how can we, if we invest something, what is the biggest impact and how can it be scaled? And that's how people introduced me to Brendan, who has been doing that for 25 years and knows so much about it. And I said, well, that's actually where you could have a lot of impact, and you can work with the farmers. And on the other side, I was much more familiar with a lot of the corporates who were talking about CSRD reporting and about all those requirements. And they really wanted, like some of the corporates, and you will meet one tonight, they really wanted to do something, but they were worried that if they do something, it doesn't have real impact or there is some issue with it. So Brendan and myself have been discussing, so why don't we find some corporates who are, for this pilot, and this is a pilot, it's important to say this is a pilot, but a pilot where actions will happen alongside great research. And we work with some corporates who have a connection to the land, who want to do the right thing. And we use this data, we use Brendan's approach, we use the corporate's requirement for CSID. We work with Trinity College with across divisions as well. So we have the department, the botany department, we have the Trinity Business School. So we're coming all from different backgrounds, trying to solve the same, answer the same questions. And that's how Project Refarm was really created. As of yesterday, we launched it officially. And you know, maybe some of you saw that we got the 4 corporates Catherine just mentioned, and we got a total amount of just over 1 million, and more than 50% of the amount, which actually we raised over the last 6 months or so, will actually go towards actions. And that was really important from day one to Brendan and myself, but also the rest of the team, that this is not just kind of like research is super important, but it is actions from day one, because I'm not even in that space that long, and I'm already quite bored and sick to go to some of the conference where you hear the same thing over and over again. And when you actually look at it, there's nothing really in actions done. It's just talk. And I think even so, we come from all different backgrounds. I think the common denominator is that we do really want action, and we want to do something now. And we might have to learn and redo it or do it differently, but it's really learning by doing rather than just having some theory. So I stop now because I think we are running out of time, but that's just a quick background.
Okay, Anke, thank you very much. That's fascinating. It's such a great story. And I think to summarize what you're saying there is that you've obviously got a passion for nature, albeit recently acquired through COVID or whatever. But you, given your background, you look for impactful, scalable models, and for you, the scalable model is working with farmers and incentivizing them to deliver for nature. And you feel that's a compelling argument for the corporate world, that we can deliver through farmers as opposed to buying the land and taking it from farmers. So I suppose what we're describing so far can sound quite conceptual until the money appears on the table. So the people, in terms of the investments, are really critical to this. And I've been very fortunate to meet a number of really great people within corporate Ireland, I suppose, thanks to introductions from Anke and Susanna. And one of them is Ken Lyons from CIE Tours, who has a real passion for nature and for community as well through his various work. But he works with CIE Tours, who I'll let Ken explain it to you, but they're one of the initial investors in Project Refarm, and we've been really delighted to have them on board, pardon the pun, Ken, because I think tourism is obviously a huge user of the land resource in Ireland, and it's really nice to see feedback coming from that sector into farmers' pockets. So Ken, I'm going to ask you to say a few words about your involvement in this project and the broader theme around financing farming for nature. So over to you, Ken.
Super stuff. Thanks a million for that, Brendan. And good evening, everyone. It's lovely to be here and see such great numbers. And great to hear from Catherine and Anke there as well. So yeah, to kind of share from our perspective at CIE Tours, as Brendan rightly mentioned, you know, we've the pleasure of showcasing the island of Ireland to international visitors, and one of the major drivers of why people come to visit Ireland is the beautiful natural landscapes. And you know, with a growing awareness that they're, you know, not in the best of situations at the moment, it felt like the timing was right that we took a more proactive approach to how we actually protect those landscapes that we fully rely upon, that we showcase to thousands of visitors that come to Ireland every year. And so since I joined CIE Tours, we've been looking at various ways that we can, in many ways, be, you know, even better kind of corporate neighbours, and to really showcase that we value what it is we get to showcase, that we have the privilege of showcasing to the international visitor. And we've been looking at a number of different things that we can get involved with, but initial conversations with Brendan and Anke just it's kind of one of those light bulb moments where you went, this makes so much sense. You'd wonder why it hasn't happened sooner. So if people ask me, why are you getting involved? My answer is, why not? And I suppose a little bit of context behind that. I was first made aware of Farming for Nature back in 2020. I was undertaking an educational program in sustainability, and we had a virtual tour of a Farming for Nature ambassador's farm, John McHugh. And that's kind of where my own personal love affair and interest in farming in Ireland and what that looks like and what it could look like in the future really started. And then to, lo and behold, 4 years later, and this opportunity presents itself. So what it does is it allows CIE Tours to get involved with something that's action driven, complemented by robust research. It allows us to have an impact both on our natural environment, but also on the communities in Ireland. And as an industry, tourism is a huge employer regionally. And I think there is actually great links between the agricultural industry and the tourism industry in terms of its contribution in Ireland. And so to have an opportunity to come on board and be part of this pioneering work and really see the role of the farmer being elevated in terms of nature positive actions just seemed like an absolute no-brainer. And from the get-go, with everyone involved, the level of energy, the positivity, the enthusiasm, the realism around it has been incredibly rewarding, and we're really excited to see what we can achieve collaboratively. So Brendan, I think that's probably enough for myself. I'll hand it back over to you there.
That's really super, Ken. I think that's very succinct. And I should explain that it's not really bright lights outside there, Ken, but you're actually dialing in from the States, which is why you have a bit of a blue sky and bright light behind you. So we're really appreciative of you dialing in and of your support for this project. What I think conceptually is really interesting about working with Ken and CIE Tours is that, when we think about our farm landscapes, we think about the food that's produced and consumed from those landscapes. But in a sense, visitors who come to Ireland consume the landscape. It's what they come here to imbibe and to enjoy. And farmers are obviously critical to managing that landscape. So there's a lovely link between Ken and our next speaker, who is Michael Davoren. And Michael is a Burren Farmer, but also a great community leader. So he's the perfect person to represent what Ken was talking about, which is the environmental and social significance of investing in farming. Now, Michael is our kind of last speaker tonight, but really should be our first, in a sense that none of this happens without farmers. I always think that farmers are the real conservation heroes, not the scientists or the politicians. It's the people day in, day out on the ground who do what they do, which really make the difference. And that's really why the Farming for Nature network has been established to celebrate farmers like that. We thought Michael would be really important to have here tonight, given CIE Tours investment in the Burren and Farming for Nature, specifically in the Burren. So Michael, I might hand over to you just to get your sense of, you've been there from the start with reps and all the way up to acres. You've enjoyed public funding over the years. How do you think farmers might respond to the sense of funding from the private sector for environmental management? But anyway, I'll let you say what you want to say, Michael, so over to you.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Well, firstly, we're absolutely thrilled to see corporate Ireland getting involved and offering to fund environmental projects, the farmers at the Burren. We are business people, just like the business people that are investing in us, even though we're farmers. They are multinationals, big outfits. We're irrelevant, little, small business people. We really have nothing in common, but yet we have everything in common. We need to turn over a margin, a profit, in order to sustain business. And every corporate company need to turn over the same thing. Different figures, but the same principle. So I, as a farmer, I'm also a businessman. So I have to look at my business, and I bought some breeding heifers last week in the market, and they cost me €1,500 a piece. It's going to be 4 years before they turn over a profit when the calf that they produce in 4 years' time goes to market. So why did I invest that much money in that heifer? Because I know there's going to be a market in 4, 8, 10 years' time for the progeny that I produce, because people need food. And we produce the raw material for it. I don't know what that market will deliver me in a margin, but I know the market will be there. Now, if I'm to invest in my time and energy into environmental farming, I must also know that the market is going to be long-term, medium-term and long-term. Otherwise, it takes me, as you well know, Brendan Dunford, in Burren life, it takes 5, 6, 7 years to bring a field up a score. I have to know that there's a market in 7 years' time. Governments have let us down badly with schemes like Burren life when it was closed down. Acres was put in place. We're 2 years into a 5-year program. We still haven't got a work schedule. Farmers have lost confidence in this. The civil service don't realise that farming and the production of a pristine environment go hand in glove, and they're long term. We can't click our fingers and produce it in 2 years, which is what's left in acres. So we ask ourselves, why would we bother? Take what we can, put it in our pocket, and get on with life. So that's not good enough for the environment. Everybody wants a pristine environment. Those heifers that I bought, I have 2 choices. I can feed those heifers the cheapest way that I can. I can't control the market. I can control the inputs. I can make silage, feed them that silage as supplementary feed next spring and for the next 3 springs, because that's the cheapest way to do it. And that's my best chance of turning over a market in 4 years and subsequent years in that animal. On the other hand, if I am paid for an environmental scheme where managing those animals to graze off the rank grasses, feed them a couple of kilograms of burn ration instead of silage, it's an investment for me. But if the environmental reward justifies that, that's the route I'll take. So, in short, we have to be given at least an incentive to farm the way we would like to farm, that at least covers our costs and gives us a margin. And we have to be given a roadmap that there will be a market for what we're producing in 5 years, 10 years, and preferably 15 to 20 years. But farming is a long time investment. And we fools that we are farmers, when we get a reward, a grant, or monies in our pockets, we put one with it and reinvest and redouble our efforts to grow our business. And the business that there's a future in growing is environmental farming, because CIE Tours bring the people here to the Burren, and the cacophony of colour that's produced every spring in the farms of the Burren is done by the proper management of grazing. Without that, the future, the environmental future, and the reason that the CIE are investing makes great sense. They're investing in their future as well as investing in mine and every other farmer in the Burren. So for the culmination of those reasons, we're thrilled to see private enterprise getting involved. I've no doubt farmers are up for the challenge. I've no doubt we'll deliver what's asked of us. We have to be given clear guidance as to what we have to do, what the environmental requirements are. And you, the environmental scientists, will tell us that. You score the fields, and if I deliver, I get paid. If I don't deliver, I don't get paid. That's fair. Acres isn't fair. It pays me for 20 hectares. After that, I'm on my own. Why would anyone bother to manage the rest of the farm when it'll cost them money? So that's going to be the challenge, that this scheme is different from what has happened for the last 15 years, where it is hand to mouth. Every 5 years, a politician wants a new scheme that will work during his term or her term as a minister, and they don't care what happens after that. That we have to look at the long term, and we have to invest in the long term, work with the farmers and the private investor. And, you know, maybe to just conclude with as you have often heard me use in the past, that great old Gaelic proverb, nothing is impossible when we work together. And that's what I see as the future.
Thank you very much, Michael. As insightful as ever. And just to summarize, if I might, Michael, what you're saying there is that I think, first of all, farmers are up for the challenge and welcome additional sources of investment, which is significant. Secondly, that investment needs to last. It can't be short term. It has to have it has to de-risk your investment in nature and also guarantee you ideally a long-term income as per your weanings. And I suppose the third thing then is that you need certainty in what it is that the market wants. You've always said, Michael, that farmers will produce and have always produced what society needs. And if it's biodiversity, so be it, we'll produce it if the market is there. So I think you summed that up very well. Now, just before I hand over to questions, two things. First of all, I'd encourage anybody in our audience tonight to submit questions in the chat box for any of, and if you can target who you'd like to answer, that's even better again. But before I do that, just to kind of pull the pieces together from our four really great speakers, I think it's a case of, you know, nature is in trouble, farming is challenged, particularly in places around high nature value farming, where it's hard to make a living relying on the conventional market. So we need to look at new ways of doing things. We might not know what these new ways look like yet, but the best way to figure it out is to dive right in. And I think this Project Refarm is about doing that. It's about diving right in, working with farmers to deliver for nature, researching then with our Trinity colleagues how companies might use that to report back, and continue then to develop investment. If we can make this work, we can attract more and more investment. And I think Anke has huge ambitions in that regard as to how much we could do. Just to clarify a couple of points to anticipate the question. So we have a certain amount of money for a 5-year pilot project. So, you know, we're limited in what we can achieve. So we'll have to manage expectations somehow, but it is largely kind of a pilot research project. And what we hope to do at this point in time is to listen to our farmers, particularly those farmers in the Farming for Nature Ambassador Network and our nominees and our Horse's Mouth mentees, because I think they're the ones with the answers. If we can work with those farmers and learn from them, so carry out actions on those farms, work with the farmer to figure out, is this working for me? Develop a really effective payment system so the farmers get paid promptly for the work that they do, and develop a funding mechanism whereby it's not just a one-off payment, but that there's a continuing dividend from a certain fund. I think that could be really interesting. That could be really compelling. But it is a pilot, and the ambition, just to finish off on this, the ambition is, well, it's not just a Burren project, it's a national project. But the ambition is that if this works well, we can hopefully develop a significant fund through which the broader farming community can benefit, nature can benefit, and investors can benefit, because ultimately the corporate world is going to need to invest more in nature, and what better way to do than through our farmers. So that's the essence of the project. So I'm going to go across to the questions now, and I'm going to go through them, and for that I'm going to need my glasses. So the first question is, I think it's a comment, and we're finishing off on a question from Brian Lee to everybody. And if any of the panelists would like to take this, for the last 40 years, the Department of Ag was encouraging farmers to remove trees and scrub to have 100% arable land and penalised if they didn't. Now everyone is trying to reverse it ASAP. There's some great schemes out there to get things moving. From speaking with local farmers in my area, there is very little interest. The general feedback about these schemes is that they're too difficult to apply for, and there's a mountain of paperwork to submit. Farmers are required to pay 100% upfront for these schemes, only to be told they haven't done X, Y, Z, or you need to provide more paperwork, or you're not getting paid in full. This is not an incentive to farmers. What is the view of the panel around the application processes for various schemes available? So I think, Michael, that's That's a question for you. And Brian, it's a superb comment. As I said at the beginning, for farmers, it's not just about the money, it's about other things as well. And one of the biggest bugbears for farmers, and Michael will come in on this, is the growing level of paperwork and bureaucracy involved, and the cost of applying to these schemes. Michael, would you like to comment, and not just for yourself, but on behalf of the farmers that you liaise with?
Yes, I mean, take the acre scheme, for instance. It's absolutely crazy. The work aspect of it that we were promised. We applied for the work last October. It was only open for 2 weeks. Now we were written to in March and told, do not start any work until we, the competent authority, give you permission. No, the work is bring our farms up to environmental, help us in, to produce better environmental results in our scores in our field by putting in gates, water troughs, repairing the roadways, etc. They're all practical things that can be seen on the ground. Yet the department won't allow us to do them 2 years into a scheme that's supposed to benefit the environment by the way we farm. Crazy, absolutely crazy. Another problem with the scheme, and I can see where people are, oh, that question is coming from. If the water truck that I decide to put into my field in order that I can graze out a certain section of Winterage had to be GPS spotted. Somebody in an office will check the GPS spotting and discover it's on a double stone wall or on a national monument. I'll be told you can't avail of that water truck grant because you're putting it in the wrong place. Can I move it 5 yards out of that? No, that can't be done. You put it in the wrong place day one, so that's gone. This is no way to treat farm. Like in Burren Life, you applied for the water trough or the gate or whatever it was. You went ahead and you did it. Somebody came out and looked and said, that's right. When you were putting up the water troughs, your advisor said, no, you can't put it there. That's an archaeological complex. Move it 5 yards the other way. So that's fine. Away we went. I had water in the field. I grazed out the field better. The environmental gain was immense to that field, and I got paid accordingly. Sorry for doddering on, but
no, I can sense your frustration from here, Michael. And I think it's a very good point, Brian, that you make. And I think if I might speak on behalf of the aspiration, at least of this project, is that there's a hassle-free, and Catherine used the term before, and we've used it before in other projects, hassle-free mechanism through which farmers can apply for funding and get paid. We have another little project in Burren called the Hare's Corner, where if you want to put in a pond, we send out, and if you're approved, we'll send out a hydrologist. And when you finish your pond in doing it the right way, you send a photograph and you get paid immediately. So I think there has to be simpler ways, Michael, I think is what you're saying, and more immediate ways, Brian, to your point of funding the urgent work that we need to improve natural capital of our farmland. And I know I used that term natural capital again, Catherine, so apologies. I have another question from Shirley Clark, and this is for Ken. So for CIE Tours, has the company received any feedback from visitors about a decline in the quality of nature in Ireland? And are many queries received about Irish farming models? Congratulations on your involvement in this project.
It's a really great question, and thanks for it, Shirley. So it varies. So there is a perception amongst our visitors that come into Ireland that we are just this really beautiful island destination where I suppose in many respects they don't think on the surface of things there could be anything necessarily wrong regarding the biodiversity, etc. in Ireland. And so are a little bit surprised for some when they hear about biodiversity loss in Ireland. Others, on the other hand, would be aware of it. It is a conversation that's becoming more commonplace amongst our visitors. There has always been, and this is not just with CIE Tours, but throughout my working life in tourism, there's always been a huge interest in farming among visitors to Ireland, to the point where you could almost say, you know, at times slightly obsessed with wanting to know more. And that's such a beautiful thing to see that level of interest. And in many respects, trying our best to represent and share what we know about the farming communities in Ireland with our international visitors. So, yeah, it's a part of our heritage. It's part of, you know, what people have in their minds when they come to Ireland, for whatever reason they come to Ireland, you know. And for us then at CIE Tours to get more proactively involved in something that's so important to our visitors just makes perfect sense. So I hope that answers Shirley's question, Brendan.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. And I think the other interesting thing about hopefully the relationship we can have in the Burren with CIE Tours, it's an opportunity as well for the visitors to learn about how farmers have shaped the landscape and how we need continued presence of the right type of farming to continue to enhance that landscape. So there's a great educational opportunity here as well. A quick segue, I see on my banner here, we've got Andreas Badinger in the audience, and I'd just like to welcome Andreas at the personal level. He's one of our Farming for Nature Austrian ambassadors, and talking about a fascination with farming, I, as a visitor to Andreas's farm recently, I'm blown away by what he and his Austrian colleagues are doing. And in Andreas's case, it's producing hay milk, which is a fantastic product. So welcome, Andreas. So next question is from Una Duggan. Una, great to hear from you. And Una says, great to hear about the project. Sorry I missed the first 10 minutes. Can you say what the percentage or euro value is of CIE's investment? What is CIE's expectation of the return for its investment? And how will you communicate this to stakeholders? So Ken, if you'd like to answer that, and it's entirely up to you if you want to divulge, and I'm happy to divulge it one-on-one, if Ken doesn't want to share it publicly, but Ken, over to you.
Thanks again, Brendan, and thanks for the question, Una. So, yeah, you know, from our side, it's a significant investment in what we're doing, but it's something that we believe in. We've been one of the beautiful things about ReFarm is the open and transparent nature to it. You know, it is a pilot project. So as somebody who's come on board from this early stage, you know, we've built up a level of trust. We have a level of flexibility there. We're not coming in to mandate X, Y, and Z. Is that we were presented with what the vision for this project is, and we believed in it so much so that we're willing to put in financial investment into it. So, and why was that attractive to us? Again, it was the action-focused nature of the project. We wanted to see our investments going in to farmers who are taking actions now. And we feel that is something, maybe as a departure from Brian's point about maybe some of the complications and administrative burdens that have been seen in other initiatives. They're being, to a certain degree, removed with ReFarm based on, you know, Brendan's extensive experience in the space. So for us, we're not coming in mandating very specific expectations. We know that the project has huge potential. We're attracted by its action focus, complemented by its robust research. And ultimately, we feel it's the right thing for us to do. And our stakeholders, when we communicate, this is exactly how we communicate with them. And they've come on board with us on this journey and are excited about what we can achieve together. So I hope that kind of provides some insight there, Una.
Thanks, Ken. I think that's interesting, and I can just it brings me to another point, which I think is important to make. I think every funder and amount of funding will be totally transparent as part of this project. We haven't fully finished the financing piece, but we want everybody to know who's involved, where the money is coming from, and if there's any strings attached, because I think we're all very conscious of the potential for accusations around greenwashing. And from a personal level, I can absolutely assure everybody present and beyond that whatever investment we're getting from the corporate world, we're spending at farm level to deliver for nature. This project has a high level of integrity, I think, given the people that are involved. And also, I think we need to bring corporate with us on this journey. There's you know, there are good businesses out there who really do want to invest and do the right thing. And what's really nice about CIE Tours involvement, if I might say so, is that it doesn't come with strings attached. They recognize that we have people on the ground who know how to do this thing, who have experience, and let them at it. So I think that's very welcome. But we can come back to that point, and I'm also happy to talk to you offline about it. Una. So Claire Flanagan, question: has the project considered using corporate funds as match funds with the state to reduce costs for farmers? So the state funding is the huge block of funding. So agri-environment is about 300 million euros per annum at the moment, and what we're talking about here is a tiny drop in the ocean. But in principle, I think what's important to say is that this is to complement and supplement public funding. We can't match it. It's like a mite and an elephant. But I think the important thing is we don't want this to displace public funding. We don't want the public budget to be reduced now that there's private capital coming in. So that's the way of answering. So it's not quite relevant to this pilot project, I think, Claire, but I do take your point. Michael, Mary Connor says that you're making perfect sense. Not for the first time, I might add. That's very interesting. Thank you. Could I, before I go back to the questions, could I ask any of the panel members, Anke, Catherine, in particular, or Catherine in particular, if there's anything you'd like to add at this point? I know you've been silent for a while, so if you want to come in on anything, please do. Now's your chance.
Yeah, I think I was looking at the question there coming in about the CSRD. So that's going to be a big focus for us in terms of working with Ken and understanding how we can support them in their reporting commitments. Okay, so, you know, it's facilitating the smooth flow of finance to the farmers, so the farmers, you know, can report back. And what we'd be looking at is how can we develop a relatively easy scorecard that can then be a template, as it were, to help corporates report. So we don't want to make life difficult for anybody. We want to make it easy for that flow of fund and knowledge and data and return, and to make this, you know, a high integrity process. So, you know, I think that's the piece, and that's why we have to collaborate, you know, and that's the wonderful example of Michael, you know, talking about that collaboration. We can't just step back and say, oh, it's for them to sort out. We all just have to dive in. And I know Anke had her hand up, so I might just sort of segue over.
Before I go back to Anke,
Yeah.
I just want to pass on David Smith's question to you. Is there an Irish equivalent to the biodiversity net gain payments available to the landowners in England? That is, where developer payments for farmers to do improvements to offset ecological degradation caused by, say, building projects? If not, are there any government plans to introduce such schemes? Catherine, you might answer that before we go to Anke.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment there isn't, but there are people working on that in Ireland, and there are certain environmental consultancies who've been asked to look at it from a developer's perspective, because the sense is it is coming. So biodiversity net gain is not here yet, but it will be here. It will become a requirement. Don't quote me on it, but yeah, it's coming. So it may not be in the next 5 years, but definitely within 10. So that's how it happened in the UK. It started with a few kind of regional planning authorities looking for this, and then it filtered across and it became a national requirement. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's not sufficient, because really it's not. There's not much gain. There's a small amount of gain. There's maybe 10%, you know, compared to what was lost. But you're not looking at the impact level that we have to have, that we need. So while I would say, great, bring it on, it's not going to be sufficient to meet what we need to do.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Anke, would you like to come in there? We have about 5 minutes left, so we'll pass over to you, and then we'll take the last couple of questions.
Yeah, actually, just on Catherine's last point and about the biodiversity net gain, one of the other investors in Project Refarm is John Paul Construction, and they're a construction company That's not their primary motivation because of the biodiversity net gain, but they obviously are seeing the developments in England, and they want to be ahead of the curve. And actually all our corporate investors, so the CIE Tours and John Paul and RWE, they all are doing something as a pilot to be kind of ahead of the curve of what will come, whether it's CSRD or whether it's biodiversity net gain. And very much like Ken said, this is, there's like we want to be very transparent here. So the funding is like Brendan said, it's a small amount. It's over 5 years. More than 50% of what we have currently raised will go to actions, and the rest will go to research. And with research, there was one other question, just to make one comment. There was saying, will you get some matched funding from the government? There is a small, like some part of this project is already matched funding. So Biorbic is a partner as well. And the corporate money coming in unlocked quite a significant amount of the money we raised from Biorbic. It wouldn't have funded that at all, but because of the corporate money, Biorbic was more than one time matched that funding. So I think it's important that everybody here, tries out a pilot. We want to be transparent, but we all, want to work together. And I think trust is probably the single most important thing on that, because that's only then we can really move forward.
Thanks, Anke. Last couple of points. I think we're going to have to wrap up now. And a word from Andreas, and I'll come back to another question from Michael then. Andreas says, nice to hear, listen to your meeting. It's very important to give farmers help look on environmental nature. It's about the pocket, the head, and the heart. I think we're talking tonight about the pocket, but we also have to consider the head, which is the advisory service, how to farm for nature, how to deliver more ecosystem services, so people like Ken will pay farmers more. But also about the heart piece. We really want to get farming for nature is about getting farmers on board and taking ownership of the environmental agenda. One more question from Michael McNamara, which is an important one, so it'll be our final one maybe, but will ReFarm be open to all farmers who want to improve their biodiversity? Long term and ultimately, Michael, the answer would be yes, that would be our aspiration. We would love to work with farmers who want to work with us, but we have to manage the experience. It's a part-time thing. It is a pilot project, and we can only work with so many. So our initial target audience will be the Farming for Nature network of people, and also some Burren farmers, because I think it's important to carry on that Burren legacy and the learnings from the Burren. So it won't be an open call for farmers that we think of at the moment, but we'd like to get to a point where we can include as many as possible, because every day I meet farmers who want to do more, and we're in a biodiversity emergency. Why can't we do more? That's the thing, but we can only do so much in this project. So finally, just 2 comments. Project ReFarm sounds brilliant. Thank very much, Ken Ranelagh and Marianne Clay. Thanks to the panel, and Marianne is one of our ambassadors for this very interesting project. In my area of Kildare, the biggest financial incentive to farmers currently is conversion to industrial solar, with over 3,000 acres of agri-land already gone through the planning stages. This large-scale industrialisation of rural landscapes will have a hugely negative impact on biodiversity, local communities and tourism. So thank you for that point, Marianne. Our vision for Ireland is that we, can have vibrant rural communities with farmers producing great food, producing energy in some small scale cases, but also producing ecosystem services. And to do that, we're going to need a new paradigm. It can't rely on public funding. We have to bring in private funding as well. So just to finish off, we've got thank you so much to our speakers tonight. It's just great to have you all as part of this. You're visionaries in your own areas. So thank you for input tonight. We'll hopefully make this available on recording on YouTube channel to lots of other interested people. Refarm.ie is the website to find out more about this particular project. We have another webinar tomorrow night. We hope you can join us between 8 and 9. It's about adding value to your farm business through various mechanisms. A brilliant webinar. So it's about adding value to your outcomes. So we want to make sustainable farming commercially viable. And so private finance, as per tonight, is one way of doing it, but there's other ways like direct marketing and so on, and tourism. So that'll be tomorrow night's webinar. Hope you can join us. And if anybody wants a good weekend in the Burren, this is the weekend to come to Clare, because the Winterage weekend is on, and we'll have our annual Farming for Nature Awards on Saturday night and our Winterage Walk on Sunday morning, which hopefully will be a fine day. So listen, thanks everybody for joining us tonight, and we'll see you hopefully tomorrow night. Good night.